Hello, glorious humans. Catherine here. Welcome to the Art of Rewilding podcast. I'm excited. This is my second ever podcast interview. Had to be with my friend Beck. This is Rebecca Freeman.
Yeah.
We've been friends a while, and Beck kind of more recently, but also it's been a few years now, got into all the world of human design, and it's been fascinating to watch and read all of her things. I'm going to let her introduce herself. She's a multifaceted, magical human being with lots of wisdom to share. But I really, really wanted to talk about human design today because I noticed human design kind of came into the ether and the world maybe like 6 or 7 years ago. I noticed it kind of popping up in groups and people talking about human design. And then all of a sudden, maybe in the last 3 years, we've really seen this massive surge. There's like apps and there's a whole lot of stuff. And what I've noticed is there's sometimes this attachment to what the label of human design can mean for someone, and people perhaps using it to guide their life as opposed to being a support for them to kind of understand more about themselves and make their own decisions. Like a bit of a lack of embodiment when it comes to these sort of labels, and people not understanding the depth of it. And I know Beck has this way wider understanding of human design than I can grasp. I really do not have a huge in-depth understanding of it, which is why I wanted her to come in, because actually I am curious about all the things she's going to say. She has a podcast, and she's all about embodied human design, which obviously that aligns very much with all the stuff I talk about in terms of embodied space holding. So they merge really well together, and I'm excited to have her here. Hey, Beck.
I'm excited to be here, and it's fun to jam with you and talk about this because we don't talk about this when we catch up socially, because otherwise there'd be no space for anything else, because I could talk about this all day long. Um, yeah, so embodied human design. It's really interesting what you say about human design coming into the collective field in the last 6 or so years, because human design's been around. Ra, the dude that created the system, he was a guy who, he lived through the 60s and 70s and was a massive geek on human behavior, and he basically just absorbed, every kind of bit of research and theory and all that sort of stuff around human behavior through those years. But also, whilst living those years, was experimenting with psychedelics, as so many people did, and all the rest of it. And eventually all of that information and that exposure to his own spiritual path and his own personal awakenings led to him receiving the voice, which was human design. So human design's been around for a really, really long time, but it was this small group of people who used to geek out on it. One of my mentors, he's in his late 70s now. He was around when human design first came about and went on the journey with Ra around, experimenting with this system in life. And I think this is really important to understand, because so many people take it into this theoretical context of it being like the voice spoke to Ra, gave him this technology, and now we learn the technology and that solves all our problems, right? And the reality is that this was, a voice that might have actually just been Ra's own mind joining the dots. Like, you can take human design as practical and real life and mundane out to as spiritual as you want, right? It's not necessarily spiritual, even though it involves these historic tools, particularly from Eastern philosophies that Ra studied in his adventures around human behavior. But for all the people that were originally into human design, human design geeks, it was about the experimentation of this system in their real lives. So it wasn't about learning the theory, it was about playing around with it. And that's the whole premise of human design. Is it gives us, if we look at masculine and feminine dynamics, it gives us some structure, some masculine container that we can then let our feminine flow with, create with, play with, be curious with, blow shit up with, find amazing unknown things with, and that's really the whole, the way I look at it it's a beautiful tool. It's a beautiful modality to experimenting with life in a way that allows you to have more permission and more freedom to play with life in the way that you're designed to play with life, not according to somebody else's rules. So we're not playing this game according to Ra's rules. We're playing this game with something that Ra has gifted the world to get them started. And I think this is really important when we look at where we've ended up here in 2023 with human design trending. Like, that was the big opening to 2023. Enneagram out, human design in. And what we've seen in the last few years, so I've been playing around in the human design space for about 10 years now, and for me it was like silently for at least half of that, and then it was like just with my mates, or when I was geeking out with witchy buddies in my spiritual closet. And then eventually somebody was like, damn, why don't you use this with your clients? And I was like, oh, I haven't trained. I still had that mentality of needing somebody else to tick my box for me to be certified.
Everyone has that, don't they?
Right? And it's actually a thing that you can see in design. People that are prone to that external tick in the boxes, I'm one of them. It's actually a really big part of my own personal journey of mastery of my own energy, my own mastery of self. My own experimentation has been about swinging really hard into that validation place, and then swinging all the way back to like the fuck you, I don't need anybody to tick my boxes for me, back to this true place of like ownership, self-ownership of mastery. And I don't need to prove that to anyone, but I really invite you to recognize it in me, right? That's my journey of mastery in my energetic body. You look at my human design map and you can see in hindsight, oh, all right, okay, I understand how my life panned out now. But in the trend that we're in, we're seeing a lot of people that are really early in their experiment, right? And this doesn't relate to age, right? So lots and lots of people who are in their 30s and their 40s, even in their 50s and their 60s, are still really early on in their experiment. And so when I look at this in terms of when we talk about people waking up, having an awakening, this isn't a spiritual thing. This is a really human thing. This is like, oh, I'm going to choose to live life as myself. That is what an awakening is. It's not like God entered my body and suddenly I was awakened into a different way of being. This is actually an internal thing that happens to people where they're like, I'm going to choose to be me today. And that can happen at any point in people's life. If we look at rites of passage, ideally when it would happen would be around that Saturn return 7-year cycle, when you're like, I've unconsciously been experimenting with life for 30 or so years, and now I'm actually ready to reflect on that and actually integrate it into my being and actually show up in maturity as myself, right? We don't have that rite of passage. We haven't had that rite of passage for a really long time. Thankfully, we're starting to feel that energetic shift into people wanting to bring these rites of passage back into our lives. And so this is really what human design is for, and you can be doing it at any point in your life. It's when you feel that internal desire to be, oh, I want to be me. I don't want to be what the world has taught me to be, or that I feel pressure to be, because the reality is when we look at a human design system, everybody has a sensitivity or an empathy of the world around them, and that can be really distracting for us, and we can feel like we should give a lot of energy and attention to that. But I actually want to just come into this place of like, who am I? And this age-old question of who am I and what am I here for? And the answer to that to always be like, you are you, and you are here to do whatever is right in front of you right here, right now. And that's an awakening. That is a true awakening. And human design is this beautiful thing that when that happens, because it can feel really scary to be like, shit, for me, it was massive judgment, which not ironically is like my major gift to master is to move from judgment to perfection, right? Everything is perfect. And my clients hear it from me all the time. Everything is perfect. Everything is perfect. And they're like, shut up. I hate it when you say that. But it's so true, because it's this, when I had my awakening, I was like, I have lived my life completely wrong. Everything I have done ever is wrong. Wrong, wrong, wrong. I am a bad person. I've made a massive mistake. Everything is ruined now. You know, I'm gonna, and this was really, when I dial that back, what that was is the original core frequency that I was programmed with was around scarcity, right? Abandonment and scarcity. And so I instantly fell into that spot when I awakened and was like, this is not who I am in my journey. And my journey has been about opening into this amazing, incredible truth, is that, like, I'm perfect, right? And there is so much in my life that has all been about walking me back home to that truth, right? And everybody has their own version of this. And human design is this amazing tool that when you have this scary awakening, it can hold you through those phases right at the beginning, but also at pockets through your life, so that you've got something to anchor back into, that you can always come home to like take a breath and be like, okay, what's here for me? And really, that's what human design is. Where we see in the trend, what human design has become is an extractive, quick fix for discomfort. And human design is actually a practice of leaning into all of those spots that are uncomfortable. And so the trend is really about taking this amazing transformative tool and using it to reinforce the exact thing that we're collectively, finding it harder and harder and harder to cling to. Yeah.
Yeah, so many like gold points there. And I suppose like we're here to remember, like we're here to remember our souls and our kids. Our kids are coming through now, and we were talking about this before. Our kids are coming through to like show us that shit can't stay the way that it was. Like it's got to change, and if we're not going to listen, they're going to show us the way that we have to move forward. And we can keep clinging to these extractive methods, or we can find the opening. And every one of these tools that we talk about, all the things that we used to hide away, astrology and like witchy things and tarot and even the enneagrams and the human design. And I work a lot with elements, and I think actually, so we haven't had this conversation, you haven't read my human design, but I really need to get you to. But I think the elements that I work with in human design seem to overlap quite a bit. And I think, like you said, the rites of passage seem to overlap quite a bit. Like the Saturn return seems to kind of overlap with sort of the fire element, and like moving from maiden to mother. Like they all seem to overlap. Like they all seem to have this guide. And even like menstrual cycle charting, like it's really it's that compass. It's like helps us to be guided on this path, like you said, to create the masculine structure. It's the same with like business strategy too, like real masculine containers, but they all have the light and the dark, and they can either constrict us and extract from us and make us like really make us feel like in collapse and like pulling, extracting from us, or they can be really holding and opening for us to just find that flow. And what I think we're seeing is this need to hold on to this externalization, because there's so much fear, like, oh my god, I can't do anything. Like you said, I feel I relate so much to what you said about this needing certification and like needing this approval, because that's how we are programmed. Like if you don't go to uni and you don't finish high school and you don't do this, and then what will become of you, if you don't get certified. And same with the hospital system, and from our history, especially as women, being validated for all the things that we do. And so we're kind of, there's like, as a collective, there's like this kind of attachment and holding on to this need to like, just tell me what to do, my human design will tell me what to do. Oh, I'm a projector or reflector, so therefore like I'm not very extroverted, or like whatever it is.
So let's talk about this, because this is like the most common use of human design, is that you learn these very basic teachings. I'm a projector, I'm a generator. 70% of the population have a sacral, so they're generators or manifesting generators. I'm a projector, I'm a reflector, I'm a manifester. I have the one of the ones that I love is like, oh, I'm a 5 profile, so people always project their shit onto me. And so
Well, that's what's going to happen, isn't it?
right. So this is where we look at, okay, we've got to be like, okay, well, why is human design trending? Why are people using it extractively? Why are they using it as a label for themselves that allows them to stay exactly where they are, when the whole premise of the system is to support you to transform? It's a transformative alchemical tool, right? And
If you
people
use it that way, right?
you
Or it
use
can
it
be restrictive if
use
you
it
want it
that
to be.
way. And why have we, as a collective, taken this and turned it 180 and used it as a box to put ourselves in, right? Because the second that you over identify with any label, it becomes restrictive, right? So we see
100%.
this. My favorite one, there's my 2 favorite ones is, I'm a manifesting generator, so I can never finish anything and I'm always doing 1,000,001 things,
And
right?
I'm a manifesting generator, and I totally sometimes can be like, oh my God, like, I don't know how to finish anything. It's like, this is not an excuse.
Yeah.
This is not an excuse.
So what we see is, it's totally true that manifesting generators are these multi-pronged, multifaceted, dynamic is the key word here, dynamic, energetic beings. They can turn on a dime. They are dancers, right? They are life, they are mobile, they are creative. And that does not mean that they can avoid their responsibility for.
Right.
And what they're actually showing me when they say, oh yeah, I can never see anything through because I'm a manifesting generator, that's what I hear, is that what they're saying is that I can never move through a level of discomfort in where I'm willing to be responsible.
Right. And that's the key thing, isn't it? Responsibility. And that's with life as a
Because
human
there's
being.
a difference to closing something off to dropping it, right?
Yeah.
And what we see is like manifesting generators who have a flaky kind of energy drop stuff. They don't close it because it's true that it's complete. They just,
Yes.
right?
Can we just, I just want to,
Can
because
you?
this is me. This is me. Yes. And I cannot within my system, especially being a mum, cannot follow through on all the ideas I get, right? So it would actually be irresponsible for me to try, because I don't have the capacity to hold all of the amazing ideas that I get. So it can't be that all of them are true for me. So I have to close them off. And that's just part of but it's about being responsible and this lack of wanting to take responsibility. Yes,
Yeah. So it's also like a lack of willingness to be embodied in the experience of what it means to be a manifesting generator. I just want to theoretically be engaged with it, but I don't actually want to feel it, because what you're feeling there is, so it's like I always look at the sacral as like, I really relate this to, to intimacy, dating, sex. That's what it's all about. It's
yeah,
about life force energy, and then the core of life force energy, sexual energy, right? So manifesting
creativity, right?
generators are
Yeah.
multi-pronged in the direction of their sexual energy. And so if you think about it, what a lot of them are programmed to do is to be constantly, like, because they're scared of being flaky, they force themselves to finish things off, which is basically like, say you were making out with your partner and then you were like, oh, okay, well, we'll have sex and hopefully I'll have an orgasm because that's what I should do, right? Rather than being like, actually, no, I'm just complete with making out for now. And that's actually, cultivating the life force energy in your system, because that's what you're here for, is to cultivate this life force energy in your system. So when manifesting generators do things, sometimes they only do them for a short period of time and then they go cold on it and they feel like they need to force themselves to keep doing it.
And it feels
Or they
gross.
drop
It
it. So
feels
imagine
gross.
you're making out with your partner and you're like, actually, I'm complete. I don't want to go any further with this. And you just stood up and walked out of the room. And they're just like sitting on the couch being like, what the fuck, right? Instead of you being like, this is amazing and I just want to hold this energy here. right? And I don't know if it's going to go anywhere later or not, but like, let's just enjoy this for what it's been, right?
Yeah.
And then that's kind of hot. And then you both get to, so this is what the whole point about being a manifesting generator is: you can burn multiple fires at once, but you have to really feel it in your body to be true to be doing that. And you've got to be responsible for tending those fires. And that's what we see doesn't happen in manifesting generators. Let's look at the other side of the coin with like projectors, and their best thing is like, their most favorite thing in the world is to be victimized by all the manky life force energy that exists in the world. Now, it's true, the life force energy in the world is not high quality. I call it McDonald's energy, because we have 70% of the population. Very few of them are like tending that in a fire and having these beautiful, nourishing, warm hearth fires as their state of being. We've got like McDonald's, fryers going. That's it, like quick fix. Yeah. So all of you out there getting into human design for a quick fix, you're working at McDonald's. You're treating your body like a McDonald's drive-through, right? Just saying that up front.
And
If
that's glorified too, right? Like that's, there is this, people don't know what they don't know. And that's why you were talking about the awakening thing, because there's this real, like, I didn't know that existed. I didn't know that I could say no. I thought I thought sex was that bad, like there's a lot of people not in their bodies, or they're just like, if I just close my eyes and leave my body, then it'll just keep happening, and everything will be fine, and then it'll work out, rather than being in the here and now and going, this is what feels good for me and this is that being in your body thing.
Yeah. And this is why, I love human design, because in this, right, like, I don't want you to feel, so this has been my mastery. I don't want you to feel any judgment here if you're like, oh shit, I use human design theory like all as a mental construct. I use the labels to get away with my shit. I'm a McDonald's. Oh no, I'm a McDonald's drive-through. If you're a projector and you're like, it's not fair, the world's full of yucky energy and I don't like it, and it's upsetting me. If this is you, there's no judgment on that. I'm like, now this is where we can go inside the system of human design and play around so that you can like expand out of that spot, right? It's
Right.
perfect. Yeah. So this is where, with my clients that I work with around human design, I'm like, lean into the uncomfortable part, because you lean into the uncomfortable part, you're gonna move through it, and then once you move through it, you're in a very magical place. Shit gets crazy in that magical place. This is where like the fun stuff starts to happen, and I'm not saying it's comfortable, but I'm saying, if you've awakened and you want to be yourself, these are the places that you want to find yourself in. This is where you want the experiment to take you. This is where you want the adventure to go. And you learn how it not to be something that's really painful and hard work. You actually learn how to be in these places in a really amazing, extraordinary way. And we were talking on this call before about how our lives at the moment are like a little bit challenging, but then there's also this way of like, but I'm so fucking here for it now. Like, I've learned how to be so here for it now that I'm radiant inside of that spot now, and that's what the experiment of human design gives you once you move beyond the theoretical label of it, which is why I do HD embodied. Even with my people that I'm teaching how to read human design, I am really uninterested in their theoretical content. I'm like more about how we did a workshop around being a reader, and I'm like, it's a dialogue between you and the client. Actually, this isn't about me spewing a whole bunch of human design information onto a person, which is 9 times out of 10 what human design becomes. You only got to look at social media for that, right? Everybody is posting all this theoretical teaching on human design. And I find this really funny because I end up with a lot of people who have been through 2 or 3 human design teachers, and they still not confident around human design because it's all in their head and they can't feel any of it. And then they end up with me because I'm the one that drops it into their body, which is actually where the magic of this system lives. You got to get inside the system. Yeah.
And this is the same with all the embodied space holding that I'm always talking about. You know, we don't hold space from a place of I'm going to fix you, I'm going to rescue you, I'm going to tell you what you need to do, which is what a lot. And I was literally just having a conversation with some of my friends about like this idea of like being a healer. You know, what does that mean? If people lie on my table and I'm doing these things, what does that look like? And I'm like, but I'm not. I'm facilitating this environment for people to heal themselves. And this is the difference between human design that I see everywhere, which I actually just keep scrolling. And I feel this is why I struggle to post about elements too, because I'm like, I don't want to tell you what this feels like for you. You need to feel it and use the system to actually feel it. But people actually don't know how to feel stuff in their bodies. And so it's just getting them in their bodies first, which is what you're doing.
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
Yeah. And so I'll have people come into my space and they'll know a lot of theory about human design. And we always go back to like, okay, so you're a projector, right? And so they'll know this theory around I'm a projector, I have incredible sight, I have a special gift, bitterness, success, and I'll say something to them like, okay, so what's success to you? And they're stumped because they've never actually felt the sensation of success in it. They've never stopped to feel the sensation of success in their body. It's a theoretical concept. Oh, when I'm on the right track, I experience success. And I'm like, well, what's the experience of success? And they're all like, fuck, I don't know. They
And
do know, but they've never stopped to tune into it, right?
That's right. But if you read social media, you'll be told. And I remember when I first started out in business, it's like, well, if you hit your 100K, then you'll be successful. And it's like, yes, but success looks and feels different to everyone. And when you've got two small little kids, and actually, we were saying the other day, we're like, actually, some days I just want to like homeschool. And I mean, we couldn't because our work calls us, we have to be here for this work. But, like success is really so different to everyone. And if you're externalizing that, then it's going to be this real heady mental, like, oh, but success means, becoming a billionaire babe or whatever it is. But it's like, is it really?
I think this success for projectors is such an interesting one because success is such a coded word, and it's coded from the open ego center in human design, which is all about worth and value, right? So 70% of the population have this center undefined, like white, right? So when you look at your chart, little tiny triangle, and it'll be white, and people look at that. If you've got it white, you're in that 70% of the population. This is the most programmable thing in your energetic body, and it starts from birth. What makes you worthy? What makes you valuable? Straight away, little babies are getting this feedback. They feed well. Oh, you're a good girl. You don't sleep consistently. Oh, this is naughty and we need to fix this. And so what are we instantly getting coded with is like, oh, following the rules makes me worthy and valuable. What a great program to start off with, right? And it's unconscious. Nobody's intentionally doing this to babies. Yeah. These are hereditary patterns that we are given. And you want to know why our kids cannot and will not receive these programmings and why they're rebelling so young against. So children are having awakenings now when they're 10, 12. My daughter's 14, massive awakening. So young, they're having these awakenings. And by remembering that awakening is like, I am me. I'm me. I can't be anybody else but me.
And no one can tell me what to do. Like, can you imagine when we were kids? I can't imagine.
Nobody can convince me to take on the program of the collective anymore. Why is this happening? Because collectively the program is disintegrating. We're moving into a new collective energetic that is founded in individuality. It's founded in the solar plexus center, which is emotions and feelings. And emotions and feelings take us into connection with our higher self, our highest self, the spirit awareness, the bigger picture, right? We're suddenly realizing that we have choice. That's what highest awareness gives us, right?
Yeah, I think for us though, as adults, having those programming, like I can't imagine as a kid, like saying some of the things that my kids say, because the whole like, you don't speak, what is it, seen and not heard, like kids don't speak up to their parents, don't be disrespectful. And I think as the adults of this generation are holding tightly because like you said, there's been this programming for so long of your worth is so tied up in being a good girl and following the rules, and also like your worth and your value being attached to what you do for others, you
Well,
know. But
and
then they're the ones attaching to these systems like human design to try and find direction, because they're like, what the fuck is happening? My
yeah.
kids are like, I can't control my kids. Like, they're not then,
Yeah.
bad, naughty kids or whatever.
So ultimately, that program, that worth and value program, comes down to safety and belonging, right?
Yeah.
And I know you talk about this a lot, tend and
Yes.
befriend, right? It
Yeah.
all comes back to belonging. And so we will distort ourselves to belong
Yeah.
if if that's what's required. And our young ones feel the new era way more strongly, which is actually, to distort yourself to belong will mean that you will be outcast. So they won't do it because they're safe. They know their safety lives in their individuality, whereas our safety lived in conformity, because that's the 400-year-old pattern that we're
Yeah.
coming out of,
Can
right?
you just say that again? Because I think this is a really, really important point. And I think, and I say this a lot to people in clinic, but I need to talk about it more. Most people will choose to belong over their authenticity. They will distort themselves and contort themselves to fit more than they will, because we're afraid of exclusion, which comes back to all the generations. We talk about the witch wounds and the sisterhood wounds and all the big pharma, like all the fear that comes with, if you're excluded, you will die alone, you will not survive. We have to be together in order to survive and thrive, even if it's at the cost of your authenticity and yourself. But what we're seeing is these younger generations are like, fuck that shit.
Yeah.
But it's hard at the moment because there's a
Well,
transition.
well, and also things get more intense the closer you get to the actual shift point. So 2027 is the actual energetic shift point, and like anything, like Saturn returns an actual 7-year cycle. People take it as this like one marker, but it's actually 7 years of your life that is devoted to maturing you if you let it, right?
Can you just talk about I actually really want to touch on Saturn returns, because that's another one. We're like going in all these amazing tangents and I love it, and people can just like follow along as
It's your manifesting generator
this is
energy.
my I'm just like, let's
Light
talk
the
about
fire.
all the
So
things.
let's finish that conversation about
Okay, yeah.
the era, because I can really like what you just said about that whole witch wound, ancestral, generational legacy. How many people in our era, our generation, our like let's say the parents, right, of this kind of time relate to being a black sheep, relate to being the one that's the pattern breaker, that is here to clear the codes, and that's because our children have been born prepared for the new era, right?
Yeah.
And so literally, like, we got to clean it up because they actually just refuse to clean it up. Yeah.
They
And
really do. They like, no,
they're like, not
it
my
gives me
job.
chills. I can feel it. The amount of parents I speak to, and they're like, this is a new generation of kids. Like, you can
Yeah.
feel the shift happening.
And some people are like, yeah, but there are a bunch of children out there that are not experiencing this, and there are a bunch of adults out there not experiencing this. I'm like, yes, but this is where we look at, there's multiple timelines that exist in the one reality. People live in different realities. Like, the sooner you get that truth embedded into your being, the more comfortable you'll be in the world. So
Yeah.
when you see all the fear mongering, when you see, so we were talking about the extractiveness around human design, this is old era, old energetic stuff, turning the volume of itself up to try and maintain its existence because it knows that it's dying, right? And there are people that will remain in that era energetic and just coexist in their own kind of way alongside of the new timeline that's coming through. And you have choice. I say this to people all the time. It's like your awakening can occur at any point, and if sometimes it gets forced upon people because they have to awaken because they're here for this. Like, back in my 30s, I had to awaken or I wouldn't be here today having this conversation with you. I needed that time to prepare for this right here, right now. I didn't even fucking know what that is. And I still have, it'll morph and change and evolve as I go through my life showing up every single day, right here, right now, right? Some people have the ability to choose whether they wake up or not. It doesn't mean that they're going to human physically die. It means that they'll exist in an old era energetic, and they will have to learn to accommodate fear, because that's really what that energy used to keep us all bound together. In the new era, you have to get really comfortable with moving through fear, because the new era is all about independence and forming bonds from that place of like, I stand here as a sovereign being, you stand there as a sovereign being, and we choose to make connection, right? Not we have to survive. We don't actually. Survival is the individual, but the thriving comes when we choose to make connections with what in human design we call your fractal, the people that you are naturally inherently drawn to and connect with beyond a mental reasoning. Yeah. And so that's what we're looking at in the collective energy. Saturn return. Well, okay.
Just before you say that, I was just gonna say, people, you were saying like people are afraid of discomfort, you know, like the discomfort that comes from like expanding and growing and changing. But the thing is, if you choose not to follow it, that's fucking uncomfortable. Like when your body is like, your whole body and your soul is like, this is not me, this is not for me, I need to shift it. And this is, I think, where we see people then go down the path of like numbing and disassociating and like drinking and out and drugs and all of those things, because they're like fighting this discomfort. So it's like, either way it's going to be uncomfortable, but like, which uncomfortable do you want to choose?
And that is like a part of actually, like, whether it's fear, whether it's physical illness, whether it's, you know, you have to energetically invest so fucking hard to keeping your reality in place. See this over and over and over and over and over again. Energy will use exhaustion to awaken you, right? So you can fight it and fight it and fight it and fight it, but like nobody has an infinite ability to keep going against the current. Eventually you run out of steam and you drown. And actually drowning is being reborn into that awakening, right? So it's all perfect. Like I never worry about people who don't want to do the things, right? And we can't judge what awakening looks like either. Like for people, their realization, like mine came with a lot of self-loathing, you know, and people would say that that was, you know, victim consciousness for sure. But it was so true for me on my path to spend a lot of time in that dynamic. I mean, and this is why I know every corner of that triangle inside out and back to front, right? That was part of my path to learn that dynamic so bloody well, so that I could show up in service once I'd matured to being really non-judgmental of how people are playing their experiment, consciously, unconsciously, whatever level of maturity they're at. Like to me, it's all beautiful. Like
and you have to feel it all. You have to feel all of it. I mean, I had a lot of resistance, and you know, the resistance just kind of makes it more painful, right? But it was all perfect, and you have to go through that to feel that and move through that. And it's the same as any transformation, any transition. The butterflies have to kind of suffer a little bit as they come out in order to expand and stretch. It's kind of, that's the human experience.
So this is where it's really like, I think I can really explain human design as an embodied practice rather than an extractive tool. Human design is your cocoon, right? When you are coming to the human design theory to learn about yourself, that is you wrapping yourself in the cocoon, right? That is like, okay, I'm ready for a transformational experience. I can feel it. And the human design theory kind of gives me something to wrap myself in until I'm ready to break through that and actually expand out into what it's shown me, right? And so what happens is people try to make human design the butterfly wings instead of seeing it as the cocoon. And this is where
Boom! Oh, so good. Yes. Yes.
So this is my practice with my clients. There's always a spot where I'm like, throw the theory out, right?
Yeah.
Stop relating to being a generator, to being a sacral being, to having a splenic authority, to whatever your
Yeah.
inherent natural gifts are. Throw it all away and show up in your life and just live, right?
Yes.
And there is undoubtedly these moments where they respond to life differently if you're a sacral being, because that's the way that you move through life, or they get an invitation, or they say something, inform the world, or they like realize over time that they're different now, that something has changed, and it's never mental. That's that breakthrough experience in the body where it's like, fuck, I'm different. And then that's when the cocoon has falls off and the wings really come out, right?
Yeah.
The human design is such a great, this is why I use it, right? And I either use it directly with people, or I've got it in the back of my mind, because I can feel the spots where people need to wrap up and be inwards, which is what human design helps you do, versus I'm ready to throw that down and move through the fear, move through the discomfort, move through that agitation of transformation, and actually play, actually be here. Like, butterflies need to dry their wings before they fly off as well. So there is sometimes this like, okay, I'll put it down and now what? And that's that uncomfortable, like nothing's happening. But then you hold that pose, you let your wings dry, and then all of a sudden stuff can flow that didn't flow before. You
And
know,
that's the difference between using human design as an external like tool versus a lot of people don't want to go inward. But that's where the magic is, right? Like when you embody it. So using it as a tool to go inward rather than just like this superficial thing that sits there
yeah.
and tells you what to do.
So we see the main things that people use human design for is like how to make money, how to find love, how to be popular, like how to
Business strategy.
prove why I'm special, or like to, I mean, a lot of people are overwhelmed by their energetic sensitivity. I mean, this is the thing. We're far more, whether you are spiritually inclined or not, we are far more energetically attuned than we realize. And so we use life to numb ourselves to that. And a lot of the times that numbing stops working. So we have to increase it for it to start working again, or we actually have to face the thing that we were trying not to feel. And human design is a great way for people to actually be like, okay, I'm gonna feel this in bite-sized chunks that I'm able. My street is always quiet, but today I have had like 6 trucks drive past.
Everything is perfect.
Everything's perfect. But human design is like this way that people can bite-sized chunks start to let themselves be resensitized, because we're a numb species. It's how we got to this point. And now we're part of what's happening is like we're learning the magic of just how much our bodies receive in any given moment. It's not just mental information we receive. Like, you look at the centers in human design and they tell you what sort of sensitivity someone has. I have a sensitivity to people's performances, their egoic games that they play, and under that, the little one, the most pure innocent essence of a being, right? Other people have a sensitivity to fear and wellness, and they can tell when an environment is not healthy for them, right? And other people have a sensitivity. The one that we're most familiar with is emotions and feelings, right? They feel other people's emotions and feelings. And so that we create all these coping mechanisms to actually stop that from happening, rather than actually welcoming that into our bodies as information that we don't mentally need to understand the information that we're receiving. That's a program. We can just receive this information because if we're sensitized in our bodies, where our color is in our chart, our color in our chart knows what to do with this information that we're receiving, and will do what it does with it. So anybody who is emotionally sensitive, who has an undefined or open solar plexus, white triangle on when you look at your chart on the right hand side, you are somebody who feels other people's emotions and feelings, and you will have a whole bunch of strategies around how you avoid that from happening, or how you rescue everybody, or villainize everybody, or get victimized by everybody in your experience of that. And the permission for you is you don't need to do a single thing. You mentally do not need to work out what to do with this, and you are perfectly capable of experiencing this when you are well nourished, right? So that this is why the game is twofold. Reopen to your sensitivity, as well as turn the volume up on all that color in your chart, because then everything just magically falls into place.
Yeah.
And your mind will be like, I have no idea what's going on.
And
Right?
that's the thing, when it's the well-nourished key part that then people just exactly get victimized and rescuey, and like, I can't handle it, and it's too much, it's overwhelming.
And then here's the other thing about human design and the trend of human design is it's not a one stop shop. It's not the
Right.
only, like, it's not the only thing I do, because it is a tool in my tool belt.
Yes,
Like, you'll never
yes.
see me out there being like, I'm a human design reader, because I don't believe in an embodied practice of using human design, that human design is the thing,
Yeah.
right? And this is what I teach to my people who come to me to actually embody human design. I say, human design is a tool in your tool belt. You have to know what the fuck the machine is, and the machine
Right.
you as the channel for the energy, right? And you might whip out human design to use as a tool in a circumstance because it's a good fit, right? But it's not the be all and end all. And so when we look at, yeah, you've got to be well nourished to be able to fully embody your energy and your energetic makeup in its unique one out of 8 billion machine, like there are 8 billion machines on the planet, and you are the only one built like you. You know, to be in that, you have to be well nourished, because otherwise your nervous system can't handle transformation and alchemy.
Right.
and and so this is where it's like, there is so many layers to the game of embodying your human design, that extractive thing around come to human design, like, come to human design to learn how to have a successful business. If that person's nervous system is fried, it doesn't matter what you tell them about their human design.
100%. This is why I love this chat, because this is what I'm always saying. Is like, I can tell you how to run circles. I can tell you about, people can tell you about business strategy and give you all the formulas and all that bullshit. But if you don't have a nervous system that is, has capacity to hold these things, if you are numbing out, if you are disconnected, if you are in your head, if you don't have support networks, all of these things, none of the tools will work. Human design is, and I love that you said that, it is a beautiful, expansive tool when used with other modalities and other knowledge and other understanding, and it all comes back. And this is why the embodiment part, and this human design being an embodied practice, is such an important message, because it's it's a breath of fresh air, to be honest, from some of the things that we see, where it then just becomes really restrictive and people end up in collapse, because then they're like, oh my God, I'm not doing it properly, I'm not being the good girl, and then it ends up, you end up in a tizzy and way more overwhelmed anyway.
And it's also quite perfect. Like, a lot of people, it's a scary proposition to actually transform, and sometimes being extractive with something, and you will get success from extraction. Like, that's like, people go and they learn a bit of theory about human design, and it'll get in, like, I talk about it in terms of layers, right? It'll get in like 1 or 2 layers deep from a theoretical perspective. The work that I do in terms of using human design in an embodied way gets like, it gets real deep, because I have projected gifts that like put it in there, right? Like, and that's practice and mastery. Like I said, I've been in this play with this system for 10 years, right? There's just a reality. I mean, I think this is something that we part of the quick fix, like this pressure that we feel to change coming, is that people feel like there's not enough time. And so they're trying to claim mastery of something quickly because it's just a sign of that fear in their system around time running out, you know. But
That's such a good point in terms of, and I talk about this with circles and hot space holding as well, like this big need to learn something, get certified in something, and then literally the next day they're teaching it.
yeah, yeah.
I'm like, you didn't even have time to like practice it yourself. Like we never reach mastery. We're always on that journey. Like embodiment is a journey. It's not a destination, but like there's got to be some time where you're actually really embodying it for yourself before you're out there teaching it, you know?
And there's value. This is the thing, people don't believe that they have value an in an immature embodiment, but I can tell you that an immature embodiment is infinitely more powerful than something that comes from theory. So even if it's
True.
brand
Yeah.
new to you, just own the brand newness of it, right? Like you don't need to leap in. So it's always scarcity that causes us to leap forward further than we are. You
And
know,
being in integrity, just being
and
honest.
our mutual friend Erin was one of the first people who got a reading from me when I actually took the stroke from my friend and went, okay, I will offer this out into the public. And she booked in, and I did a reading for her. And like, oh my God, I should go back and watch the recording because it was like 3 or 4 years ago now. And I would laugh at the quality of that reading back then compared to what I'm capable of delivering now after
Yeah.
4 years of my own alchemical process.
Yeah.
But it had infinite amounts of value in that moment for the people that received it, versus now at the level that I serve and what I serve now, it's it's a different playground. Like there's so it's, you know, in terms of this sensation of like time and time running out and pressure, and I need to do more and be more and get there quicker and hurry, you know, I need big results really quickly. My answer to that is, what are you afraid of? Right? And that's the spot to go into. And it's uncomfortable to get that honest with yourself, because you have to admit that just being here is actually the perfect place, right? And where
Perfect.
all the power actually exists. Yeah. And
Yeah.
this is why human design as a tool is fabulous, because it's like none of that shit matters until you're on this spot, right? Like people love to jump ahead with human design instead of experimenting around with the fact that they're a generator. Oh, but everybody's a generator. That's boring. Okay, like turn on. Yeah, right. Okay.
Yeah, that comes out a lot, doesn't it, about generators? There's so many generators. So I want to talk about the individual human designs actually, because I think that'll be interesting. But I think what you were saying as well before about, you know, there's like the heady theoretical stuff only gets you a few layers, and there is still value in that, because we still need, if you, so there are some people that if they entered your programs, it would blow them so out of range because they're not ready yet.
And this is
So,
right. This is why that extractive stuff is great. It actually gets people ready for my field. I love it. I'm always like in conversation with people when they've had multiple readings or they've been in other people's fields. They know a lot of theory around human design. I'm like, great, because that just gives us more capacity to actually experiment now. You know, like there is nothing wrong with that. And it's like, I mean, I serve after the awakening, really.
yeah,
That's like just where I'm at. And
yeah.
that's fantastic too, right? People have got to get to the awakening. They've got to get comfortable with having been awakened, and then we can play.
But
Right?
it's also just about raising that awareness that actually, hey, there's more. Like, did you know there's more than this? And like, if this is not feeling like it fully serves anymore because you've hit as
Yeah.
far as you can go with this, hey, there's more. So all of that still serves such a beautiful purpose. Like we still need all of those people, and there is potentially more. And also promoting this idea of like, integrity. And this is why I'm so big on, ethical space holding, in terms of like, well, if you are new and you are playing with it, then play with it. And when you're teaching, you're being honest about that, and it still holds value. And in 4 years, it's going to be really different. And no matter how long you've been in it, it'll still be really different in a few years' time. And that's just this journey of
Yeah. And
humanness.
look, and there is various levels of distortion in the human design community, people
Mhm.
serving human design. It's just true. Like, some of the teaching is coming from people who are really immature with the system, and so they're turning it into something that isn't clean anymore. Like, they're just
Yeah,
teaching stuff that's outright, I mean, my radar is for offness, and some stuff is just wrong, like, it's just not true.
yeah.
And
And
I,
sometimes it's really shamey, and also it can send people on a path of being more disconnected from
yeah.
themselves. So
and, and
that's where the
and that's
embodied
the
part
embodiment.
is
Yeah.
so important. You got to feel it. If it feels off, or somebody tells you, well, you're a generator and this is how you should feel things, and you're like, that does not feel good in my system. Like, trust that over trusting someone who you think is an expert over you. Like,
Yeah. and
that's
and it's the cleanliness of the channel, right? The amount that person can, like, deliver the theory through into the other person without adding their own stuff on top. So this is
right.
what we see in the stuff that's really distorted, is the person hasn't actually lived their own experiment, so there's a lot of stuff to add on top, right?
Right.
Whereas when you're in your experiment, then you clean up your energetic system. You've got more of a frequency to the way that you are designed to be, and so you don't add shit on top, right? That's just how it is. It's like cleanliness. Like, the cleaner the channel, the less, dirt accumulates on the content of what's coming through. The
And the
thing
less you're attached to the outcome too. Like, if you're like, oh my God, I don't feel like I can do this, and I need to put all my own human stuff on top of this to make it sound better because I don't feel like I have value, then it just creates this attachment to
Yeah.
wanting it to go a certain way.
The biggest thing that I see in terms of, um like, the whole, serving out of human design, is that there's a lot of validation attached to it. So people trying to prove themselves. So when you're receiving human design information out in the field, this is anybody listening to this, when you're receiving it, I want you to feel like if it gives you permission to play with that information, or if it is like a hard and fast prescription that essentially is another program, another should, another could, because this is what we see with human design, is it's like, oh, I'm going to take that program that you've been given and I'm going to put another one in its place. It's like swapping codes over, right? Instead of, what we
Yes.
really want to see is human design take that program out and leave you with the space, so that you can actually wake up inside of you what inherently in your DNA is already there. Yeah. So that's the thing to feel for when you're consuming human design theory. Feel into, does it feel like this person is giving me permission to play around with the thing that they've given me, right? Or are they telling me, get in my box?
And I love that what you said about, is it replacing it with another code? Because that's the key. And I was having that conversation with some friends before about the healing thing of like, are people healers? And it's like, well, if it's just like, yes, we have modalities, we can do these things, but if it's just replacing it with another fear code of like, you need to rely on me in order to do these things, or business is the same, it's just replacing it with another code. How does that feel in your system? And that's where people need to experiment, like you said, and play with it. How does that actually feel in your system to be told to replace? For some people that feels safe, for them, because that's what they're used to.
Oh, and this is where it's all perfect. Like, sometimes that swapping of that code is actually what allows you then to get a little bit closer to the point where you're able to take it out and let your own system take over, right?
Yeah.
So it's not bad or wrong. Like, this is what I was saying about people coming into my field after they've actually done quite a bit of human design work first. But then some people just come in fresh because they're well nourished, they're well resourced, they've come alive for this, and it's just time, like divine timing, right? So it's like, you feel for yourself inside of you what you are ready for, right? And your mind might have a preference over what that is, but your body is actually what knows. And this is why we talk about inner authority in human design, because it's your authority that tells you. Like, if my mind had chosen my career, it wasn't to be some person who's working with this thing that a guy from the US invented whilst on LSD, right? Like,
If we could go back to our teenage selves and be like, look what we're doing, they'll be like, what
yeah,
the hell happened to you?
yeah.
But also the journey was perfect and we couldn't have skipped any steps, right? Like you can't skip the steps. So tell me about the different systems because there might be
Yeah,
people
let
listening
me
who
let
have
me give
no
you
idea.
an embodied transmission on each of the five. I work with the five. There is a debate around whether there are 4 or 5 types in human design, but I go with 5 because I like to give manifesting generators extra play space that they wouldn't get in the 4, right? And I just think that's an evolution of the system that's come about. I think it's one of those, natural things that we evolve through. Originally there were
So,
no
so some
types.
people say there's no man gens.
Yeah, some people say that manifesting generators are a subtype of generators, right?
Ah, interesting.
Yeah, and look, that, to be honest, either or, it doesn't really matter, right? You're feeling your own system. You work out. Does it feel better to have your own type? Do you feel okay about being included with all the other sacral being straight generators? It doesn't really matter because it's about the experiment. This is where the theory.
Yeah, yeah.
I did a live on it recently. I'm like, this is just mental masturbation. This is
Yes,
actually
it really is.
experiment, right?
Yeah.
So let's do it. Let's say, so generators are the people that have a lit sacral in their system. That is the one thing that their system needs to have. And so generators as beings, when we talk about types, we're talking about the sum of all your parts. We're talking about the entirety of your auric field, the entirety of your being, right? How when you walk into a room, energetically, what happens, right? That's what we're speaking to. And so when you're a generator, your auric field is designed to be enveloping. What do we mean by enveloping? You are somebody who, when you walk into a room, your energy automatically starts to permeate the space. You start to influence what is going on in terms of the energy that's available, which is why with generators, your being, not your doing, and this is the distortion that so many generators have, but your being is actually at the essence of your game of life. Your purpose here, who you are here, is to learn what makes that fire inside of you the most nourishing, delicious, nutritious, warming, enveloping kind of energy. Because then when you do that, the ripple effect is that you change the frequency of the field around you, right? That's what you do. And so we say that generators are here. There's a lot, they talk a lot about generators lighting themselves up and lighting up the room. This isn't about what you do, this is how you're being, all right? So it's about tending that inner fire so that you have this really yummy nutritious field, because your field becomes the field. And this is why Ra talks about generators, and in that he's including manifesting generators as the gods, right? The creators of humanity are the generators and manifesting generators. Now, the difference that manifesting generators have is they have this extra flow of energy that surges through them spontaneously in any given moment, right? And so this is where we see the dynamic nature of manifesting generators come through. So they still have that enveloping aura that they change the field energetically. The life force energy that they bring is the life force energy of the field. But manifesting generators will do that in their very own, very unique, very dynamic way. So it changes from moment to moment to moment how they're nourishing their being, and so therefore bringing that nourishment to the field. Whereas generators tend to have a little bit more solidity and stability to the way that they operate in terms of being lit, right? They're a little bit more like consistent, but with the caveat of like a lot of generators could very easily shift into being a manifesting generator with the one transit, right? So it's like some generators are like, no, I'm quite dynamic too. And I'm like, yes, but at your core, there's a stability to your fire, right?
Yeah.
Manifesting generators a bit more dynamic nature. They're the trailblazers. They show us how to do life a little different, right?
I feel that because the generators around me, I need their stability.
Yeah, yeah. And
Like
what
I
you
need that stability
people
around.
are like, oh, I'm just a boring old generator. I know that was definitely, I'm a straight generator. And I was like, really like, oh, it's a bit dull. I'm just like, oh, just my one little fire here. But actually, like, I'm like, my God, like the what I see that fire of my being able to collectively create, I'm like obsessed with my inner fire, right? Like, I'm like, this
And the
is,
consistency is so inspiring. Like I see
yeah.
that and I'm like, damn, generators can just like
So
consistently
yeah,
keep
so
it going.
if you have this in your system, just feel that way that you are the creatrix.
Yeah.
You are the creator. We take you off the planet, a whole constellation disappears,
Yeah.
right? I'm really passionate about sacral beings realizing how much they generate our the constellations of their lives. So like you look around you at your connections, every single connection that you have, you are in some way, shape, or form responsible for the nutritious, delicious, healthy energy of all of those people, right? It's a bit like being the mother.
Yeah. Yeah.
So there's that. Then we have the non-sacral beings. There's three different types, right? So we have projectors. Now, projectors, they're here to, so if we think about what they do, they walk into a room, they refine, tweak, and improve the flow of energy, right? So they are people that have incredible sight in some way. They literally see systems, processes, patterns, procedures, and they know how to do those things in the most efficient way, or play around with those things to find out how to do it better, right? And so that might be like looking into an individual or looking at a collective thing. They'll walk into a room and they'll be like collectively, or in the village, tribally, or individually in you, this is what needs refinement, right? That's what they're here for. They were the last energy type to actually be created in the world, and that was because we're a shit show of energy. Like there is so much messy energy, and our projectors are here to be like, okay guys, I'll give you some instruction on how we clean this shit show up, right? And that's why they call projectors the new CEOs of the world. The thing
Thank
about,
goodness for projectors.
yeah, thank goodness for projectors. Now, the thing
Right.
that we see is that projectors are really bitter because nobody is inviting them to use their sight. Or they use their sight and everybody says, I don't want to know what you see, because there was no invitation there. So what we really need for projectors is for them to value themselves and their sight. Doesn't matter what anybody else thinks about it. Do you value it in yourself? Do you practice it in yourself? Do you love this about you? Do you actually embody this ability and have full permission for this ability inside of your own being? Or are you constantly victimized by the fact that you're not something else? All right.
100%. I've got two projectors in my family, and that's like 100% it. I'm like, oh, you're so victimized.
Yes, yes. So projectors have this really amazing game. Like I have such amazing projector connections, because I'm like, take my juice and go and be magnificent. Like I'm like an open invitation to any projector site, whether I need it or not, because I just want all projectors to realize that their site is a fucking gift to the world.
Yeah.
Go and see and enjoy, find the delight, find the aliveness in your own site, right?
Yeah.
That is projectors. Then we have manifestors. So manifestors are these people that, like manifesting generators, have these spontaneous surges of energy, right? But unlike manifesting generators, in between those surges of energy, they do not have an internal fire lit, right? So what we see with manifestors is they tend to be very on-off people. We call them closed auric fields. Think of it this way: a manifestor, when their auric field is closed, there's no surge of energy in the room, would be doing nothing to the energetic field at all. It would be like they weren't even there, right? And actually, if you
tried to get them to interact with the field, they would get angry. They would tell you to fuck off. They would be like, leave me alone, right? Because they actually just want to be in their own field, closed, inward, right? It's really yummy for them to be in their own space. But when this surge hits, it's like they have to let that barrier down and let people know, inform around, because what manifestors do is they move energy very powerfully. It's like a grenade going off in the collective field, right? So you don't just silently throw a grenade into the room. You have to be like, hey guys, I'm throwing a grenade, so that everybody can be like, wicked, I'm gonna get my pose right for the impact of this, right? And so this is, I also call them the train drivers. It's like, you have to let people know where the train is going. Otherwise, you've got a bunch of grumpy people on the train saying, I didn't want to go here. And you've got a bunch of people on the platform saying, hey, I missed my train. That's unfair, right? So that's our manifestors. They move energy, but only when it's true for them to move it. Otherwise, leave them the fuck alone. Yeah. And then we have the reflectors. Now, what are the reflectors? The reflectors are these beautiful people that just 24/7, 7 days a week, exist in the field to sample the field. They are the field. So if you think about this analogy of one reflector to 100 people, that's about, like, in the world, that's kind of the percentage. 1% reflectors to 99% everybody else. So one reflector to every 99 people. And that one reflector samples all the other 99 and then tells them generally what the hell is going on, that that their sensitivity picks up on, so that we can course correct things, so that we can find the wonder and delight in the hidden things without it need to be a clanging giant mess. So they are like our early adjusters. So things don't have to get so loud and rowdy and messy before we pay attention to it. Now, for them to do that, if we're talking that room analogy, you want the reflector sitting in the middle of the room and happy to be sitting in the middle of the room, right? Now, how do we make it so that the reflectors are happy to be sitting in the middle of the room? We put no pressure on them. They're really sensitive to pressure. So they just get to exist. Yeah. And we don't force them to be something that in that moment they're not. They're also the most malleable, most flexible beings on the planet. So they can become projectors, manifestors, sacral beings, depending on their own personal lunar cycle, right? So they shift and change a lot. They're not static beings, and they teach us how to be malleable and how to be flexible. So they're the types, and all of them, like, we need all of them. They all have a role. Yeah.
And that's the thing, it's not like one is better than the other. There's a bit of a undertone of like, manifestors are the best, and you're so lucky if you're a manifester. And and it's interesting because every type has its own light and dark too. Like, there's, depending on how you're playing with it, depending on how whether you are in enjoyment and following pleasure and following your sacral, or whether you're not, whether you're want to be in your closed auric field and want to be left the fuck alone, or whatever it is. So it's interesting, some of the messages that we see. So if people are new to this and they want to find out more about it, or they, what's the process? Like, what do you suggest? Because we're bombarded with a lot of messages about it.
So my recommendation is, so if you are somebody who's surfing the net and Googling it and looking into it and all the rest of it, I've given the advice on that around feeling what you're receiving, and does it feel like it's giving you space to experiment. But if you're really like, yeah, okay, I really want to learn more about this, there's two things that I recommend that you do. Go and listen on YouTube or whatever to Ra talking about human design, right? So that's like the original kind of source material. He talks in kind of a crazy language and whatever else, but it's like the most pure kind of information you'll get. And then the other thing is, find somebody that you really resonate with and get a reading from them. And it doesn't have to be me. Different readers transmit this information in different ways, and you'll know the person that you connect with, right? Like, feel the connection. I cannot give you I cannot recommend a reading highly enough, because it's a very noisy, mentally noisy space, and a reader will be able to cut through that noise and give you exactly the things that you are here to begin your experiment with, right? A good reader will. And so trust who you feel drawn to and just book in with a reading. It's people that have come and had readings with me, they say it's something that they listen to over and over and over and over again, and it was like the most wonderful thing that they have received in terms of being able to anchor back into themselves. So that's what a good reading will allow you to do. It's not giving you an external answer, it's actually attuning you back into your own system, right? If my field is of particular interest to you, I have an offering called Portal. So I don't do one-off readings anymore, because I just found that people were like, okay, I've had that taster, and now I'm like, like, how do I play with this? How do I experiment with this? But they weren't ready to commit to the full unlocked 12-month journey. So there's a container that I have called Portal, which involves 2 one-on-one sessions with me, and it's a 3-month container where you can consume some really high quality theory around human design that I've prepared for you, and you can ask me questions. So it's like a really good kind of, it's called Portal because it's a really good portal into this world of human design, but it's also a really good portal into your own path of awakening. So it's kind of like a place where you can get attuned to whatever comes next, and it doesn't matter who that's with or if it's on your own. It just allows you to really ground into something that'll be supportive for years and years and years to come. So I mean, anybody who's feeling resonant with my field, I would recommend Portal. It's the place to land, really, and to be served and tended in what's come alive inside of you.
Which is important, I think, because I remember when I was first kind of seeing it around many years ago. I think we chatted a little bit, this is a long time ago, and I just like downloaded the thing off Jovian Archive, whatever, and you just look at it and you're like, I've got no fucking idea what any of this means, and it's all, and then you start to like read some things, but it does feel superficial.
There is the problem with human design in the public space, and so like most people are like, there is so much information available in the public, why would I pay somebody?
Yes, good point.
And so this is what I'll say to you, is that you will spend an equal amount of time unlearning stuff that you've consumed in the public space as you do consuming quality content. So it's messy.
And it's whether you value your time or your money, like you're gonna spend all this time diving into it. I mean, I was just like, it's overwhelming, and I kind of dip in every now and then, but it's not. I just prefer to read your stuff and listen to your because you've got a podcast as well.
Yeah, I do. I have a podcast series that runs through every single center on the human design system. So if you're not ready to invest in yourself in terms of human design, join my free container spell book and go and listen to the HD Embodied podcast series. And and I'm in the process of uploading a whole bunch of human design articles into that space, and there's plenty there to consume that's free. And then Portal is a step for when you're ready to invest in yourself, if you really want to anchor into an experiment.
Yeah,
right?
And maybe unlearn some of the stuff, like how, and I think that's the thing about having a guide, and that's the difference when you have someone who can kind of hold you in that experimenting and playing. As we said, like, it can be uncomfortable, it can unlock some stuff that you didn't realize was there, and having somebody there who can witness that and kind of attune that and pull you out of victim bullshit or whatever it is, support you through that, makes all of the difference. I think
it's a great way. I find it's a great way to I don't want to say it saves you time, but it makes every moment count. It keeps you present in the experiment, and then that's where it gets really juicy and nourishing, and everything can really, it's like the fertile soil for things to happen.
And that's the thing, because human design is that tool, and then there's all the other things to kind of fertilize the soil for what's to come, and who knows what it will be. I've got like 15 minutes before I have to pick up my boy, but I really, really want to talk about Saturn return, because I feel like maybe we need to do a whole other episode on Saturn return stuff. But I would love for you to, because I know you're running a retreat on this
Yeah,
specific.
look, in terms of human design and Saturn returns, we look at it from a 7-year cycle, right? So from 28 to 35. This is really particularly like evident in people who are 6 profile lines, because they literally go through an energetic being shift through that 7-year cycle, and they do
What
some
age did you say it was again?
28 to 35.
So
That's
similar to what, like, that's what we usually see it
yes.
written as. Yeah.
So you'll sort of see it starts off at around about towards the end of the 27th year. There'll be this sensation of like, something's changing, something's different. And then you'll go through, it's like, think of it as like waves, right? So it gets more intense in spots and then it drops down and you're like, oh, good, it's over. And then it comes back. But it's all about integration. This is why we look at it as a 7-year cycle. Everything happens in 7-year cycles in human design. And this really correlates to the fact that cellularly we recycle ourselves every 7 years, right? And so if we look at the 7-year cycle of the Saturn return, what this is really about is completing your experiment of youth and then moving into a portal where you integrate the lessons of what youth taught you and choosing to step into the beginning of your maturity, right? So we really look at it as like, up to the age of 28, you are really the maiden, and that doesn't mean that you don't have any value, because, oh my God, the maiden has a different kind of value to the mother, right? So it's like really letting yourself have that maiden era and then letting it complete and honoring the completion of it. And the way that you honor the completion of it is literally no rush, 7 years of being like, wow, what the fuck was that all about? And letting the things that aren't coming through into maturity fall away. And sometimes that can feel really scary because they were things that you really did love and value for that period of your life, right? But then that's that, stepping into the great unknown of like what's waiting for you in maturity. And so what we see is by the time people get to 35, they've got a really great understanding of their lessons and the lessons that they have learned. And look, when I got to 35, I wasn't quite finished. It took me a little bit longer. I'm stubborn. It's in my system. I am naturally stubborn. So I still had to like tidy up some things after 35. So it's not like the full thing. But by 35, I had good awareness of like what the hell had happened through my life. And I was really ready to let it go, which is why for the next couple of years, there was some real big clunks where I literally said, no, I don't do this anymore. And we see then people shift into this thing around like, oh, actually now I understand what being an energy, a nourishing energy, contributing to a collective, being in service, receiving from that is actually all about. I'm not necessarily good at it. I'm not necessarily masterful at it yet, but I get that this is it because I'm done with that maiden era and I'm ready to become a creatrix of something more than just me. So
you kind of initiated like I always talk about grief being like this initiator for transformation. And so from maiden to mother, it's and mother phase exists whether you are actually biologically a mother or not. We begin to birth things, but in order to birth things and gestate things, we need that maturity, and we need to like have alchemized all of the lessons that we learn experimenting and playing as a maiden. But it's that grief that we kind of that's the first time people really experience that, and that becomes this like pivotal point of like, oh, loss, grief, and having to feel all of that. And what we hear a lot about with the Saturn return is often it's like this quick time. It's like, oh, it lasts like a year or it lasts whatever. Whereas when you started talking about it as a 7-year, because I thought I was a bit crazy because I've been thinking about it because I turned 30. I'm 36. I'll be 37 this year. But about 35, I was like, God damn, like my Saturn return lasted like 7 years. And then you posted about it recently and I was like, "Oh, okay." I just thought that I was just taking a really long time, and I feel actually that it didn't fully, well, I don't even know, we'll see how this year comes out, but it really did take maybe even closer to like 10 years to properly get to the point where I'm like, "Oh, I feel back in my body,
Yeah.
kind of alchemized all those lessons and all of that grief, like immense amounts of grief." But it took a long time. And you can see in my evolution, even in my business, it's changed so much. But I feel like I finally crossed the
Yeah.
threshold. Like, okay, it's not something that just happens and like blows up your life and then it's done in a year. Like, this took fucking long time.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's all it's the passage of maturity, right? And so, I
Right.
mean, I had kids in my 20s, so I had kids in my maiden era, and that so it's
Yeah.
not about biological
No.
parenting. It's about your inner maturity and
Right.
being willing to step up into a level of responsibility that the maiden just doesn't take, right? There's
Right.
nothing wrong with it or bad or it's not that there's lesser value in that. It's just that it's true that you hit a point in life. So back in the olden days when we didn't live so long, the Saturn return was our point of becoming the wise woman. Like we only got
Right.
so wise because we only had so many years. Now there's a third phase that kicks in after 50 when we have our Chiron return. And then that's when what we now call our wise one, our Marga and
Yeah. Yeah.
right? And we have this middle phase now where we get to be the mother, which isn't necessarily the wise woman, the elder. It used to be. This era now, though, is really about we can really expand out into nourishment. We can
Right.
really expand out into, I call it being the billabong, right? Like it's like that delicious space that nourishes so much more than the individual. And because we live longer, we literally get to expand out into being that even more. And so our Saturn return, rather than no longer being a big deal, actually becomes even more of a amazing rite of passage because that's what nourishes us from the inside so that we can bring that outwards, right? So that's
Right.
how I look at the Saturn return. And in relation to human design, when we look at the energy of a person, this is where it's like, are you ready to go next layer deeper in the embodiment of your energetic gifts, of your mastery, right? Gene Keys talks about this really well, to move from shadow to city. And Saturn return is like, well, are you ready for the gifts? Are you really ready to let that immaturity go? Are you complete with your experience of that immaturity of your natural essence and ready to choose that gift of your natural essence? And that's what the Saturn return portal is all about.
I love it. You just mentioned Gene Keys. Is that connected to human design
Yeah,
or is
so it was
that a
birthed
whole?
out of human design. So Richard Rudd was one of the students of human design, and he actually birthed Gene Keys through the human design system. So there is very close links between gene keys. So every gene key is a human design gate.
Yeah.
The different paths in gene keys. So for example, the genius pathway in gene keys is the incarnation cross in human design. So we see correlation. It's like a deeper dive into components of the human design system. I love it. I use both
Yeah.
intertwined when I use those tools, and it's really great to when I like for things like this for Saturn and that it's really great to look at that maturity of those energetic gifts, bringing some of that gene keys magic through into it. So
Yes. Oh my gosh, such a juicy taster of, I feel like we could talk for hours and hours and hours, and I love it so much. Is there anything else you feel like would be useful or important to know about people jumping in? I mean, you've already talked about where we could find it. Any other nuggets of wisdom that you want to add? And you can totally be like, no, I feel like I've got everything out.
I think I feel complete. But my final message is always like human design is the energy of permission. So find the permission inside of it. Go into it and find where permission lives for you. And that's different for every single person. And that's the magic of this system is it's a tool, it's a modality, it's a gateway, it's a portal, right? Like so don't be scared to go into it rather than just playing with it on the surface of the theory.
Yes, thank you. This is so exactly why I wanted to talk to you about it, because it is so different for every person, and it is a tool, but the tool doesn't dictate you or where you need to be. You get to drive it, you know? And so your teachings are so important in a world where people are still navigating, trying to find things to support them on their awakening journey and like their coming home journey, but that don't constrict them from their own knowing and their own intuition. And I think that's the difference. So you've really covered all of that so perfectly and amazingly. How can people find you? And you talked about Portal. What's your podcast?
The best place to find me is on Instagram. My handle is Rebecca Kate Freeman. And I also have a website, RebeccaKateFreeman.com. So those two places will link you to anything and everything that you wouldn't want to find.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Always so much fun to chat with you, and so fun to talk about HD and all your passions. We don't get to talk about them enough. All right. Bye.